Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks with ADSR. In this video, we'll be taking a look at all the new features and improvements in FabFilter Saturn 2. So I was really excited to get my hands on Saturn 2 and do this video because I've been a Saturn user for quite some time, and it's honestly been one of my go-to saturation / distortion plugins for a few years now. So Saturn 2 picks up right where Saturn 1 left off, and I think it adds some tasteful new features and improves on some old ones. Overall, I really like the update. All right, so I've pulled up the first version of Saturn because I want to do a quick compare and contrast. Obviously, you guys can see the difference in the GUI. The color palettes are a little bit more muted, a little bit more grown up, I would say. I personally like both. I don't really mind one. I really don't like one more than the other. But the reason I brought this up is because I wanted to show you what, in my opinion, is probably one of the best additions to Saturn 2, and it's really more of an improvement of a workflow. So when Saturn came out, it was pretty groundbreaking in that you could modulate things within the plugin, things like an envelope or an LFO. And what that allowed you to do in theory was to really tailor the saturation and distortion to the sound that you're working with. So distortion and saturation has a tendency to change the envelope, the attack, decay, sustain, and release, depending on how you had set, of the sound. A good example of this would be an 808. All right, so I've pulled in an 808 sample that is a pretty popular type of 808 for trap and hip hop in 2020. Now, it's got a real short decay, real punchy attack. It's a little bit cleaner than I'd probably like, but it sounds like this. So a really common thing to do with an 808 like this would be to add some saturation or distortion to make it stand out a little bit more in the mix. Now, if I load up FabFilter Saturn and I just keep it on the default warm tape and turn up my drive to about 70%, I'm going to bounce that in place, and then we're going to kind of A/B these, and you're going to see that it changes basically the envelope of the sound. It's going to really increase quite a bit of presence and volume in the sustain of the sound, which is going to change the whole sample, essentially. Check it out. All right, so the green one is the one that I just bounced out of FabFilter Saturn, and you can see that we don't have that nice decay anymore, right? So there's ways around this to fix this, but it's a multi-step process, and that's what was so awesome about what FabFilter Saturn brought to the table. It says, hey, instead of having that happen, you could just modulate with an envelope or an envelope follower your drive so it fits the sound that you're trying to distort. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because FabFilter Saturn 2 really improves on that whole system. In version 1, which I'll pull up right now, generator, and then in this, you'd have to hit plus and then hover to a hidden drop-down arrow to choose your source. So we could do, band 1 drive, and then you would turn up the amount with this slider, and that's how you could achieve that. In version 2, it works just like a synth, like Serum. It's awesome. So you click Add Source. We're going to do Envelope Generator. You can click on this to expand it. I'm going to shape this to look like my 808 here. And now I can just drag this dot onto my drive. It's that simple. And you can set the threshold for how it triggers. And obviously you can set the amount here with your slider. So I dialed in my settings, bounced in place, and now we can see that they are basically the same shape. We just filled in some of these waveforms, these gap in between the waveforms, because that's what saturation is going to do. But now it has the exact same basically response within the mix, but it's dirtier. So Saturn 2 now has 28 types of distortion and or saturation. Version 1 had 14, and they're now nicely categorized into types or subfolders. We have tube, tape, amp, saturation, transformer, which is entirely new, and then effects. So I'm going to quickly run through some of the new algorithms or types of saturation and distortions in Saturn 2. Now in tube, we have a new one called subtle tube. In tape, we have another new one called subtle tape. And then in the amp category, we have 4 new amp types. We have American Tweed and Plexi, and then British Rock and British Pop. Saturation, we have a subtle saturation and transformer. All 3 of these are new. And then the effects, we have breakdown and fold back. So let's check out the subtle tube on this key patch. Here it is without FabFilter Saturn 2. And now let's add in some of that subtle tube goodness. let's test out the subtle tape on this same sound. So I really like those because if we change this here, let's mute this one. If we change this to what the cleanest setting used to be, which was a clean tube or clean tape, it's gonna be a lot more dirty. Right, so these subtle versions of all of these different types of saturation distortions allow you to use Saturn II on more nuanced instruments or parts of your mix or production. For instance, they're gonna be great on vocals, just lightly dirtying up drums, key sounds, synths, you name it. So let's check out one of the new subtle saturators on a drum loop. So here is the drum loop without FabFilter Saturn. And now with the subtle saturation. Right? It's very musical, very dialed in. So if we change this again to gentle, listen to the difference. I mean, subtle to gentle is a massive difference in FabFilter Saturn II. Let's go to subtle tape, which should sound really good on a drum break like this. So I see myself using those all of the time. Now let's check out these transformers. We have subtle, gentle, and warm. All right, so to take a look at some of these new transformer algorithms, I've pulled up a detuned respace. On its own, it sounds like this. And now let's try out the subtle transformer. Pretty cool, pretty subtle, as the name suggests. Let's go to gentle now. Right, now again, the great thing about FabFilter Saturn in general is this multiband function. So what I can do is I can go and make sure my drive is pretty much down in the meat of that bass, and we just add that gentle transformer to the high end. Super musical. All right, so let's go now to the warm transformer, which is going to be the most aggressive one. And this crossover is something that you can modulate. For those of you who don't know, pretty cool, just tip and trick there. All right, let's check out some of the amp. Here it is with the new American Tweed amp in FabFilter Saturn II. All right, so now we're going to run through some other features really fast just to finish up the video. So there are a bunch of new professionally designed created presets, and you can see all those here in these different categories and folders. And then we, of course, do have the version 1 presets as well. Now, the different generators, they actually have, like the envelope follower and the envelope generator itself, they have these different modes that will basically tell it how to respond to the incoming audio. You have default, fast, long, and medium. Under that, you'll see this high quality tab. This is basically two different settings or types of oversampling. We have good, which is 8 times oversampling, and superb, which is a asinine 32 times oversampling. So that would hit your CPU quite hard. I'll know that FabFilter Saturn II And Saturn was a multi-band distortion plugin. Well, we now have access to more bands. So I'm going to go through and max out my bands here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as opposed to in version 1, we just had the 4. Now, speaking of the bands, you actually have slope crossovers. So different decibel per octave slopes, 48 dB all the way down to 6 decibels per octave. So 6 decibels per octave would be more of a smooth transition between your bands, and 48 would be more of a noticeable hard transition when you're trying to get surgical with where the distortion is or isn't happening. All right, so that's going to sum up this first look. All in all, FabFilter Saturn 2 is a great update to an already incredible plugin. If you guys have any questions or comments, post those below. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Like I said at the beginning, I'm Echo Soundworks. I'll see you guys next time.